500,000 years ago, the world was still half asleep. The continents looked familiar, but the creatures that ruled them were strangers to modern eyes. Across the humid lowlands of Southeast Asia, the air shimmered with the cries of cicadas, the hiss of monsoon rains, and the deep green breath of ancient forests. It was a time before cities, before kings, before memory itself, when survival depended not on civilization, but instinct. In those forests, something immense moved among the shadows. The trees bent under its weight, bamboo cracked beneath its hands. It was no myth, but the last of Earth's great apes. Gigantopithecus blacki, a titan covered in dark copper-brown fur, rising 3 meters tall when it stood upright. To early humans it was both god and monster, a presence that blurred the line between fear and reverence. The forests stretched from southern China through Vietnam, Laos, and Thailand, vast corridors of bamboo and broadleaf, thick with fruiting figs and wild ginger. Here, Homo erectus, the firemaker, had settled along riverbanks and caves. They were strong and clever, wielding stone tools and the mastery of flame. Their lives were small compared to the giants that stalked the canopy, yet their minds were awakening. Eyes that began to question the world around them. The year might as well have been an eternity ago. The Earth's axis wobbled slightly different. Monsoons came harder. Nights were darker. But human curiosity, that same spark that would one day reach the moon, already flickered within them. By day, small bands of Homo erectus foraged in the undergrowth, crafting tools from river stones, cracking open nuts with the same rhythm as their heartbeat. They watched the movements of animals, deer, pigs, elephants, and occasionally the dark silhouette of something far more enormous moving between the trees. The oldest among them told stories beside the fire, grunted tales of the forest king whose steps shook the ground, whose breath was thunder. They spoke of glowing eyes seen beyond the flames, of trees that trembled without wind. For the first humans, these were not legends. They were warnings. Deep in the bamboo hills, the Gigantopithecus lived largely unseen. It was a peaceful herbivore, but in its silence lay power. Its massive jaws could crush bamboo with ease, its limbs built to climb and hold. It had no predators but hunger and time. Its kind had once been many, spread wide across the forests of southern Asia. But now the forests were shrinking. Ice sheets far to the north began to alter the weather, drying the land and thinning the green. The bamboo forests retreated, and with them the great apes. To Homo erectus, the world seemed eternal. They could not imagine extinction. But the signs were already there. As rivers changed course and food became scarce, groups moved further inland, into territories once dominated by the forest titans. Inevitably, paths would cross. One dusk, as the light sank into mist, a small hunting group followed the sound of breaking bamboo. They thought it might be elephants, but when they reached the clearing, they saw it. A massive figure hunched over, tearing at bamboo stalks thicker than a man's arm. The creature turned, its dark eyes gleaming like wet stone. The air froze. The humans did not move. Neither did the giant. For a moment, two worlds regarded each other, one ancient, one rising. The humans smelled the damp fur, the musk of the forest. The ape heard the soft crackle of their firebrands, saw the glint of flint blades in the twilight. It was not yet violence, not yet recognition. only the quiet knowledge that something powerful stood before them. Then the creature rose to its full height. A low rumble escaped its chest, not a roar, but a sound that vibrated through bone. Birds erupted from the trees. The humans backed away slowly, clutching their torches. The giant turned and vanished into the forest, leaving only broken bamboo and silence behind. That night, by the riverside fire, no one spoke. The flames danced in their eyes, tiny reflections of the towering being they had seen. They had met something that lived outside their understanding, something vast and alive. In that moment, awe replaced fear. Far above them, in the dark forest, the Gigantopithecus lay beneath the dripping leaves, chewing slowly, listening to the wind. It did not know that the creatures it had seen, fragile, small, yet burning with fire, would one day inherit the earth. The forest slept again, but not as before. The air held a new tension, an invisible thread binding the fates of ape and man. And as dawn returned, the mists rolled through the valleys like ghosts of the future, whispering of what was to come. A time when the shadow of the giant would fade, and humanity would rise from its echo. Centuries passed, yet the forest kept its secrets. The rains washed bones into limestone hollows. Mud sealed the memories of vanished lives. What remained of the giants, their teeth, their shattered jaws, slept beneath the ground for 500,000 years, waiting for human hands to uncover their story. It was not until modern times that their presence returned to light. In the hills of southern China, at a place called Liuzhang, a farmer digging for bat guano in a limestone cave stumbled upon something strange. A molar the size of a man's thumb, heavy, yellowed, its roots thick as tree bark. He sold it to a merchant who believed it belonged to a dragon. The merchant passed it to a German paleontologist named Ralph von Königswald, who realized at once that this was no mythic beast, but the largest ape ever to walk the earth. That single tooth cracked open a forgotten world. More remains were soon found, massive jaws, teeth worn flat by grinding bamboo, all pointing to a creature of astonishing scale. Königswald named it Gigantopithecus blacki. Yet for all of the time, the bones unearthed, one question haunted him. Did early humans ever meet it? To answer that question, we must go back, not to laboratories, but to caves older than history itself. Deep in the heart of Tam Quyen, in northern Vietnam, archaeologists uncovered a layer of red earth packed with fossils. There, in the same strata, lay tools chipped by Homo erectus, primitive hand axes, flakes of quartz, alongside fragments of giant jaws and teeth. It was as if time had captured a scene mid-breath, man and giant ape sharing the same cave, the same age, the same vanished forest. Scientists argued, was it coincidence? Had floodwaters washed the bones together, or had the two species truly coexisted? The evidence whispered something more intimate. The stone flakes bore traces of wear consistent with butchery. Charred bones nearby suggested fire. And in one corner, half hidden in the silt, the jaw of a Gigantopithecus lay split, as if struck by a tool. No one could be certain what happened, but the picture forming was vivid and unsettling. Imagine a humid dusk 500,000 years ago. A band of Homo erectus shelters in a limestone cave above a river valley. They tend a small fire, its smoke curling up to the stalactites. Outside, thunder rolls through the jungle. The smell of rain and ash fills the air. They are hungry. A carcass lies at the entrance, massive, fur matted with blood, one arm twisted beneath its weight. The creature must have fallen, wounded or starved, and they have found it. They approach cautiously. It is unlike any animal they know, neither bear nor boar nor man. Its skull is enormous, its teeth square, its body still faintly warm. Perhaps they strike it once more to be sure. Then instinct takes over. Tools flash in the dim light, hands cut meat from muscle. The scent of burning hair and fat soon mingles with smoke. For the first time, humans taste the flesh of the forest king. To them it was survival. To the world, it was a turning point. Because in that act, primitive, desperate, unthinking, one species began to replace another. When the rains came, the fire died. Floodwaters swept bones and ash deeper into the cave. Mud closed over them like a lid, sealing away the proof of that ancient meeting until modern times. And when the archaeologists brushed away the red earth, they were not just uncovering fossils. They were opening the oldest chapter of our relationship with power. The line between myth and science blurred again. The Chinese called the fossilized teeth dragon bones. Villagers ground them into powder as medicine, never knowing they held the remains of a forgotten giant. Across Asia, stories echoed through generations of towering ape men who once roamed the forests, who watched humans from afar, who vanished into mist. These weren't fables invented from nothing. They were memories, distorted by time but rooted in truth. In museums today, the jaw of Gigantopithecus sits under glass, massive and silent. Its teeth are ground flat, its enamel still stained by the minerals of ancient soil. It speaks of a creature both powerful and gentle, a being that ruled its forest until change and humankind brought its reign to an end. The bones tell a story, but they also raise a question that science still wrestles with. Why did the giant ape disappear while humans endured? Some say it was climate. As the ice ages grew colder, bamboo forests died back, cutting off its main food source. Others believe our ancestors played a role, burning forests, competing for land, hunting when hunger pressed too hard. Perhaps it was both, nature's cruelty and man's ambition intertwined. Whatever the cause, the evidence is clear. By 300,000 years ago, Gigantopithecus blacki was gone. But the memory of its shadow lingered, in the fear of the dark forest, in the myths of hairy giants, in the instinctive shiver that still crawls our skin when we hear something large moving unseen in the night. In that silence between firelight and jungle, something fundamental was decided. The age of giants was ending. The age of humans had begun. Long before the word giant was ever spoken, the forest already had one. In the misty valleys of Pleistocene Asia, Gigantopithecus blacki reigned supreme. It was not a predator, nor a monster of rage, but a creature of pure, quiet dominance, sculpted by evolution to rule the green world. When it rose on its hind limbs, it towered nearly 3 meters high, its chest broad as a boulder wall. Its arms were massive, reaching past its knees, muscles coiling like living ropes beneath thick fur. Each hand could crush bamboo like paper. The skull was enormous, heavy-jawed, domed at the top, built to carry the weight of jaw muscles thicker than a human's thigh. Its molars, ground flat and broad, told the story of a plant-eater, an herbivore designed not for speed or hunting, but for endurance, chewing, survival. Yet this was no simple animal. Beneath the calm surface of its black eyes flickered intelligence, not human, but aware. The giant ape knew the rhythm of the forest, when the bamboo would flower, when the rains would fall, when fruit ripened high in the fig trees. It understood the pulse of nature better than any early human could. In its domain, it needed no tools, no fire, no shelter but the shadows of the canopy. Each morning began the same way. Mists curled over the jungle floor, sunlight piercing through like shards of gold. A slow, rhythmic sound echoed through the trees, the thunk of bamboo stalks breaking. A single adult Gigantopithecus stood among the groves, its huge hands guiding stalks to its mouth, stripping the outer bark with its teeth before chewing the soft pith inside. Around it, smaller shapes moved, juveniles, learning by imitation. They followed their mother through the forest, mimicking her motions, tugging at fallen branches, beating the earth with open palms to test its sound. For tens of thousands of years, this cycle continued unchanged. The forest was their fortress. Leopards avoided them. Even saber-toothed cats gave them space. No predator dared challenge a being so powerful. When startled, a Gigantopithecus could shake the ground with a single roar, a sound that rolled through the valleys like thunder. Birds scattered, monkeys fell silent. Yet in that peace lay a fatal flaw. The giant ape depended too completely on its paradise. Its diet of bamboo made it a prisoner of habitat. When the monsoons shifted and the forests thinned, it had nowhere to go. Strength alone could not defeat hunger. The fossil record reveals this tragedy in numbers. The teeth of Gigantopithecus are worn down to the roots, evidence of years spent grinding harder, drier vegetation as bamboo vanished. Its size, once a symbol of dominance, became a curse. It required too much food to survive scarcity. Nature, indifferent and precise, had built a creature too specialized to adapt. Still, imagine it alive. Imagine standing before that titan in the ancient jungle. You would hear it before you saw it. The deep creak of bamboo bending, the dull thud of its steps. The smell of earth and musk filled the air. Then, through a break in the mist, you would see it rise, a mountain of fur and motion, golden eyes watching you through the leaves. There was no malice there, only caution, perhaps curiosity. Its posture was somewhere between human and gorilla, broad shoulders hunched forward, arms like pillars supporting half its weight. When it moved, it did so deliberately, every step slow but unshakable. It didn't fear predators. It feared nothing but emptiness. To early humans, such a creature must have seemed divine. The first Homo erectus who glimpsed it from afar might have mistaken it for a spirit of the forest, a living mountain that ate trees and vanished into fog. No wonder myths later spoke of forest gods, hairy men, and sleeping giants. The memory of this ape would ripple forward for 500,000 years, transforming into the legends we still whisper. Yeti, orang pendek, Bigfoot. The true animal, however, was neither myth nor monster. It was the last survivor of a noble lineage, cousins of orangutans, remnants of an age when apes ruled Asia's trees. DNA traces suggest they diverged from the orangutan branch about 9 million years ago. The orangutans adapted to canopy life, light and flexible. The Gigantopithecus grew earthbound and massive, too large to climb yet too intelligent to perish quickly. It endured for millions of years while climates changed and seas rose, evolving into the ultimate forest specialist. Every part of its body served its world. Molrode molars to grind bamboo pulp, side jaw hinge for crushing woody stems, embarrassment bones to anchor muscle weight, fingers to pull branches and strip bark. keen sense of smell to find ripe fruit even in darkness. Its brain, though smaller than a human's, was complex enough for memory, recognition, perhaps even emotion. When one of its kind died, the others lingered nearby, silent. The forest held their grief without witness. From a distance, their society might have looked peaceful. Small family groups moving slowly through the trees, mothers guiding offspring, males keeping watch near rivers. Their dominance was quiet, effortless. Yet the seeds of extinction were already sown. Overdependence, isolation, and the slow arrival of another ape who had learned to wield fire. In evolution's long story, power is never enough. The Gigantopithecus was built for strength, not change. Homo erectus was smaller, weaker, but restless. While the giants remained bound to their forests, humans learned to shape their world. That difference, invisible then, would one day decide everything. At dusk, when the sun fell behind the ridges, the titan rested beneath the tallest bamboo, chewing methodically as shadows deepened. Its heartbeat echoed through the still air, slow, steady, ancient. Somewhere beyond the trees, faint and fragile, flickered the glow of human fire. Neither creature knew it yet, but history had already chosen its victor. Dawn returned to the Pleistocene forest in shimmering gold. Mist drifted between the trees like pale smoke, and the songs of hornbills carried over the canopy. Beneath the great shadows of bamboo and fig, the last giants stirred. A female Gigantopithecus rose from her nest of broken branches, shaking dew from her fur. Her infant clung to her chest, blinking at the first light. The mother's enormous hands moved gently, guiding the young one toward a grove of tender shoots. The air was cool and thick with scent, resin, fruit, and the faint musk of other apes nearby. For a moment, all was calm. Then came the crack of stone against bone. Not far away, a small band of Homo erectus worked beside the river. They had discovered a carcass, a deer trapped in mud half sunk in the current. The group moved with practiced rhythm. One cut meat with a flaked stone, another gathered wood for the fire. Smoke rose in thin trails curling through the morning haze. Neither species yet understood that they were bound by destiny. One ruled the trees by strength, the other the land by thought. The forest was large enough for both. For now. From the higher ridge, the Gigantopithecus mother paused. Her eyes caught the glint of firelight flickering through the bamboo. She had seen that glow before, far away. It fascinated and unsettled her. Fire did not belong to the forest. It hissed, it crackled, it changed everything it touched. The humans below were smaller than she remembered, smaller even than the gibbons that swung through the canopy. Yet they moved together, spoke with sharp cries, and carried light in their hands. They were nothing like the predators of the forest. They walked upright, fearless, their movements full of strange purpose. She watched in silence, her child pressing close to her fur. The humans laughed, unaware of the colossal eyes above them. To Homo erectus, life was a balance of risk and reward. Each sunrise demanded food, water, and shelter. They followed animal tracks through the forest, learned the taste of roots and tubers, and sometimes stumbled upon traces of the giants. Crushed bamboo, dung the size of stones, the deep, round footprints half filled with rain. Around the campfire at night, they would mimic the sound of the giant apes' roar, beating their chests in jest. But when the forest grew too quiet, when something large moved in the darkness, laughter turned to fear. Every shadow might conceal the forest god. Still, Curiosity drove them closer. One evening, a young hunter crept away from the fire, following the heavy scent that hung in the air. He came upon a clearing bathed in moonlight, and there, kneeling beside a fallen fig tree, was the giant. Its fur gleamed silver beneath the moon, shoulders glistening with dew. It tore branches from the tree and chewed with slow patience. The hunter froze, his breath shallow. He had imagined the creature in stories, but now, seeing it alive, it was both beautiful and terrifying. Its eyes turned toward him, vast and reflective. For an instant, neither moved. The hunter raised his torch slightly, unsure whether to flee or stand his ground. The Gigantopithecus stared, then gave a deep, resonant grunt that shook the leaves. Not anger, a warning. The human stepped back slowly, heart pounding. He returned to camp before dawn, speaking in broken gestures. His companions listened in awe, glancing toward the forest as if the giant's shadow lingered there. The next night they moved their fire closer to the cave. Fire meant safety. Fire meant control. Over time, patterns emerged. The humans learned to follow the forest's rhythm. When the apes moved, when fruit fell, when rain would come. They learned indirectly from the giants, reading the signs they left behind. The Gigantopithecus too began to sense the strange presence of these small, clever beings. They were no longer just animals. They were something new. As months turned to seasons, the two species shared the same rivers, the same paths, sometimes the same trees, but never the same silence. When the humans' fires burned, the apes kept their distance. When the fires died, glowing eyes sometimes watched from the darkness. One dry season, the bamboo groves failed to flower. Food grew scarce. The Gigantopithecus wandered further from their safe valleys, sometimes raiding human camps for fruit. The encounters turned hostile. A human child vanished one night. The tribe whispered that the forest gods were angry. In truth, hunger had stripped fear from both sides. The giants approached the edges of firelight. Humans threw stones to drive them away. A clash of survival, not hatred. Yet every encounter left blood on the soil. For all their might, the Gigantopithecus could not understand fire. They feared its movement, its unpredictable crackle. The humans learned to use that fear. With torches raised high, they drove the giants away from the river valleys, claiming more ground. The forest gods retreated into the hills. But some nights, as the wind howled through the bamboo, both species must have wondered the same thing. Were they truly so different? They ate, they bled, they protected their young. They remembered. Each carried the spark of awareness, though one glowed brighter. Evolution had drawn them close enough to see themselves reflected in the other, and in that reflection lay both awe and doom. By the time the rainy season returned, the Gigantopithecus rarely came near human fires. They moved deeper into the mist, their calls echoing faintly at dusk. The humans listened and told stories of giants who walked upright, of forest lords who once ruled before men, of beings too powerful to last. And high in the mountains, under a blood-red sunset, the last king of the forest stood among the dying bamboo, listening to the faraway crackle of human flames, the sound of a new era rising. Night in the ancient forest was a living thing. It whispered through the leaves, breathed from the mouths of unseen beasts, and pressed close against the skin. To live without fire was to live inside that darkness, helpless, hunted, waiting for the dawn. But one night, In a limestone cave above a winding river, a miracle flickered to life. A man, Homo erectus, knelt over dry twigs and stones, breathing fast, his hands trembling. Smoke rose in thin curls. Then, with a burst of orange, flame erupted. It hissed, snapped, danced like a living spirit. For the first time, darkness retreated. Around him, others stared wide-eyed. They reached toward the warmth, laughing softly, their faces painted gold and red by the glow. The flame crackled against the wet walls, casting shadows that moved like ghosts, the silhouettes of people and animals twisting together. To them, it was not science. It was magic. They did not yet understand friction or spark, but they understood power. Outside, the forest paused. Every creature felt it, a new light where none had been before. The Gigantopithecus, feeding miles away, lifted its head. Its keen eyes caught the glow above the trees. It had seen lightning, but never this. A steady, human-made fire that burned without storm or thunder. The smell of smoke drifted on the wind, sharp and alien. The giant ape grunted softly, uneasy. Fire had no place in the rhythm of the forest. For Homo erectus, the discovery spread like wildfire itself. Fire meant warmth on cold nights, protection against beasts, cooked food that softened the body and sharpened the mind. The taste of roasted meat changed everything. It released energy faster, feeding their growing brains. By the next generation, fire was part of life. Caves became homes. Nights became gatherings. The darkness, once feared, now became theater, where stories flickered in the firelight. But the gift of flame came with a shadow. With fire, humans no longer feared the forest. They began to reshape it. Small fires cleared brush for hunting. Accidental sparks leapt to dry leaves. Flames raced through the bamboo groves, leaving black scars on the hills. Smoke hung for days, blotting out the stars. And in that smoke, the Gigantopithecus coughed. Their forests shrank. The bamboo, their lifeblood, burned faster than it could regrow. For the first time in millions of years, the giants were forced to move, driven not by predators or drought, but by the ambitions of a smaller, cleverer ape. 1,000 nights like this passed. Fires multiplied. Humans slept safely while the jungle burned at the edges. The balance of power began to tilt. Imagine one such night. The forest glows red under a stormless sky. Embers drift like fireflies. A herd of deer flees across a dry riverbed, hooves striking sparks against the stones. Behind them, dark shapes move. Humans with torches, chasing, shouting. The Gigantopithecus watches from a ridge. Its massive hands grip a charred branch. Its nostrils flare at the strange scent of ash and cooked flesh. The light hurts its eyes. It growls, low and uncertain, remembering when darkness belonged to its kind. The flames leap higher. Trees crack. Smoke rolls toward the stars. The giant turns away and vanishes into the deeper jungle, retreating not from beasts, but from an idea, the idea of control. For the first time, one species could command nature. The humans no longer waited for daylight to hunt or gather. They no longer feared predators' eyes in the dark. Around their fires, they felt like gods. They began to understand cause and consequence, how one spark could drive herds, clear land, alter the world. And though they didn't yet speak words for it, they felt something rising within them. Destiny, far above the valley, the last giants huddled beneath smoke-stained trees. The young coughed, the elders roared in confusion. The forest no longer sounded the same. The cicadas were gone. The birds had fled. The night, once theirs, now belonged to something else. The fire spread both literally and metaphorically, across land, across mind. The humans learned to carry embers wrapped in leaves, to reignite flame wherever they wandered. Each new hearth became a beacon of intelligence, a seed of civilization, and yet, none of them realized what they had set in motion. They were not just burning trees. They were burning the age of giants. In the coming generations, Gigantopithecus would vanish deeper into the smoke, its world shrinking day by day. But for now, the jungle still pulsed with life, caught between two forces, raw strength and newfound fire. One was ancient, the other unstoppable. The rain had not come for many weeks. Leaves hung dry and brittle. The rivers thinned to mirrors of mud, and the wind carried the scent of dust instead of life. Beneath the weary bamboo, Gigantopithecus wandered, restless, hungry, uncertain. The groves that once fed them were half dead, their roots scorched. On a distant hill a new sound echoed, a crackling, rhythmic hiss unlike thunder or wind. The giants lifted their heads. Smoke coiled above the trees, black and endless. The smell was thick, sharp, alive. Fire. They had seen wildfires before, caused by lightning, by drought, but this was different. This one spread against the wind, moving with purpose, as though guided by thought. At its edge moved humans. Homo erectus had learned to use flame not only for warmth but for conquest. They set dry grass alight to drive animals toward waiting spears. They burned the undergrowth to open pathways and flush out game. To them, the forest was no longer sacred. It was a tool, a resource, a battlefield. The fires rolled through the lowlands like red rivers, consuming bamboo, charring fruit trees, clearing the dense thickets that had hidden the giants for ages. In the orange light, the silhouettes of Gigantopithecus loomed, huge, slow-moving shapes against the smoke. A mother guided her young through the burning grove, her fur singed by flying embers. She tried to climb, but the branches cracked beneath her weight. Sparks rained down like stars. The baby clung tighter, coughing, its dark eyes wide with confusion. The roar of the fire mingled with her cry, a deep, chest-shaking bellow that once frightened predators but now vanished into the storm of sound. There was nothing in the forest that could stop fire. Not strength, not size, not even fear. From a nearby ridge, humans watched the chaos below. To them, it was both terrifying and magnificent. The flames cleared ground for their hunts. Smoke drove animals toward the open plains. When the fire died, they would return to feast on the carcasses left behind. They did not know that among those shapes fleeing the inferno were the last of Earth's great apes. The next morning, the forest was gone. Charred trunks stood like gravestones. Ash lay thick over the soil and the air shimmered with heat. The Gigantopithecus that survived retreated higher into the mountains, where the fire could not follow. But food was scarce there. The bamboo that had been their lifeline grew only in the valleys, now turned to dust. For the first time, the giants felt hunger gnaw deeper than fear. They wandered further each day, searching for unburned groves, finding only smoke. Their massive bodies, built for abundance, betrayed them in famine. Below in the river basin, the humans thrived. Fires had cleared hunting paths. Herds of deer and pigs gathered in the open grasslands that sprouted from the ash. The people of flame had carved their territory from the ruins of the forest. They sang in the night, low, rhythmic chants around the glowing embers. Sparks danced into the air like spirits, and they believed that smoke carried their voices to the gods. They did not know the gods they replaced were watching from the mountains, starving, fading, ancient. One evening, as dusk painted the sky in ash gray, a human scout saw movement among the blackened trees. A colossal figure emerged, tall as two men, shoulders broad, fur streaked with soot. The Gigantopithecus paused, sniffing the air thick with smoke. Behind it, another followed, smaller, perhaps a mate, perhaps a child. The humans froze. The giants did not charge, they simply stared as if trying to understand. For a moment the two species faced each other through a curtain of drifting smoke. The humans raised their torches, the apes blinked against the light. In the eyes of the Gigantopithecus, the humans saw something unexpected. Exhaustion. Not rage, not hate. Just the heavy, hollow weariness of a dying age. Then, without sound, the giants turned and vanished into the haze. That night, the forest burned again. Weeks later, the smell of death spread through the valleys. Scavengers gathered where the fires had raged. Among the ashes, a human hunter found bones unlike any he'd seen. Thick, enormous, blackened by flame. He touched one and shivered. To him, it was proof of the forest god's wrath. To us, it is the fossil record of extinction beginning. Over the centuries, as humans expanded, fire became their inheritance, the invisible weapon that reshaped the earth. And for every flame that rose, the shadow of the giants shrank. The age of fire was also the age of forgetting. The forests would regrow, but the Gigantopithecus would not return. Their bones turned to dust beneath the new trees. The people who came after would remember only stories of hairy spirits, forest kings, creatures who vanished into smoke. In the end, perhaps they were right. Fire had not only burned their bodies, it had burned their names from the world. The forest was no longer quiet. Where once only the deep calls of apes echoed through the valleys, now came the ring of stone against stone, the rhythmic crack of wood against bone, the shouts of hunters moving in unison. Homo erectus had changed. Fire had done more than warm their nights. It had rewired their minds. Around every campfire they planned, remembered, and dreamed. The flickering glow became a classroom, a council, a forge for thought. Hunting had once been chaotic, desperate lunges with rocks and sticks hoping luck would do what skill could not. Now it became strategy. At dawn the hunters gathered on the riverbank. They carried sharpened wooden spears hardened by fire, their tips blackened and strong. Each hunter took a place in the formation, some to drive, some to block, some to strike. They communicated with gestures, grunts, and sharp whistles. Theirs was not language yet, but it was close, a symphony of intent. Ahead the ground trembled faintly. A herd of stegodon, ancient relatives of elephants, grazed among their dying bamboo. The hunters waited downwind, motionless. One false move could mean death, but patience, too, was a new weapon. At a signal, a sharp, high whistle, they moved. Branches cracked, shouts erupted, spears flew. The panicked beasts turned toward the river, their heavy feet sinking into mud. The hunters closed in. Fire torches waved at the edges, blinding the animals, trapping them. The kill was brutal, primal, and quick. When it ended, the valley fell silent again. Smoke and blood hung in the air. They worked together, cutting, carrying, cooking. The smell of roasted meat filled the night, drawing other bands to the glow. It was not just food, it was triumph. The hunt bound them together, tribe to tribe, mind to mind. With each victory, Homo erectus learned more about tools, teamwork, and the patterns of prey. Their bodies grew leaner, faster, their eyes sharper. Their fear of the dark lessened. They began to explore further, following the herds deep into the foothills, into the realm once ruled by Gigantopithecus. At first, they found only signs: crushed bamboo, snapped branches, footprints as wide as a man's chest. The hunters touched these prints in silence, half in awe, half in challenge. They had heard stories from the elders of the giants of the forest whose arms could uproot trees. But the humans were no longer helpless. They carried fire. They carried purpose. In the fading light of one evening, they reached a grove untouched by flame. Bamboo stood tall here, green and alive. The air smelled sweet again, damp with life. But within that peace, something stirred. A shadow moved between the trunks. Then another. The hunters froze. The shapes that emerged were enormous. 3 Gigantopithecus feeding quietly among the bamboo. Their fur glistened in the dying sun. One looked up, eyes catching the orange glow of the torches. It blinked, confused but unafraid. For long seconds, no one moved. The humans gripped their spears, hearts hammering. The apes stood still, the air vibrating with their low rumbles. It was not battle yet. It was contact, raw, unfiltered. The hunters saw not monsters, but reflections of themselves, standing upright, watching, thinking. The giants saw something smaller, stranger, creatures that carried sunfire in their hands. Then, a mistake. A young hunter stepped forward, spear raised, his fear disguised as courage. The sound startled the youngest ape, who roared, a sound so deep it shook the forest floor. Birds erupted from the canopy. The humans stumbled back, shouting. The giant did not attack. It simply turned, guiding its young away into the deeper bamboo, fading like ghosts into the green. The hunters stood in silence, trembling. The forest was suddenly too quiet. The crackle of fire seemed small and weak compared to that thunderous roar. That night, as they sat around the flames, the elders spoke. They told the young ones that these creatures were the first lords of the world, that the forest had belonged to them long before humans learned to walk upright. The giants were old gods, they said, and gods were not to be challenged. But younger eyes saw something else in the firelight. Not gods, but rivals. If the giants could bleed, they could die. If they could be driven away, humans could take their place. From that moment on, the forests were no longer neutral ground. Every hunt, every fire, every step deeper into the bamboo was an invasion. And as the dry season stretched on, the balance began to break. The Gigantopithecus felt it too. They sensed the shrinking of their territory, the noise of human voices echoing through the groves. They no longer ruled unchallenged. The age of fear had ended. The age of ambition had begun. Morning broke heavy with smoke. The once green forest glowed faintly red beneath a haze of ash, and the ground was scarred with prints, human and giant alike, crossing, diverging, fading into the mist. In the high valleys, the last herds of Gigantopithecus searched for food. The air no longer carried the sweet scent of bamboo flowers. Whole groves had turned black, their hollow stalks brittle and empty. The great apes moved slowly, ribs faintly visible beneath their fur. When they found a single living patch of bamboo, they ate in silence, chewing endlessly, as if trying to recall the taste of an age that was already gone. They were gentle giants, built for peace, not war. Their jaws crushed stalks, not bones. Their arms lifted branches, not weapons. Their massive hearts beat to the rhythm of patience, not anger. For millions of years that gentleness had been enough, but now gentleness was a weakness. Down below, the humans thrived. Fires ringed their camps like suns scattered across the earth. The smell of cooked meat drifted through the valleys. Their numbers grew, so did their confidence. They no longer feared the giants. They began to tell stories not of worship, but of victory. The forest gods, they said, had retreated because man's fire was stronger. Children listened wide-eyed, clutching tiny sticks of ember as talismans of power. Still, there were those who remembered the truth, who had seen the giants up close and felt the tremor of their roars. To them, the Gigantopithecus were not demons or gods, but mourners of a dying world. One dusk, a hunting band followed the tracks of a wounded deer into the mist. The prince led to a valley choked with fallen bamboo. There, among the ruins, stood a single Gigantopithecus. Its fur was matted with soot. Its left arm hung useless, scarred by fire. Yet it still searched the ground for food, peeling bark from the last living stalks. The humans watched from behind the trees. The creature noticed them but did not flee. It simply looked, eyes deep and reflective, almost human. No one moved. The air held its breath. Then the leader stepped forward. He carried a spear darkened by flame, the tip gleaming with sap. An ash. The others followed, spreading wide. The giant straightened, towering over them, chest rising like a hill. For an instant it seemed ready to fight, but instead it turned away. With slow, deliberate steps it climbed the slope and disappeared into the fog. The hunters stood frozen, unsure whether they had triumphed or been spared. When they returned to camp, they told the story differently. They said the giant had fled in fear of fire, that man's power had driven the gods into exile. Around the fire they laughed and mimed its retreat, waving their torches. The legend of victory began that night. For the Gigantopithecus, the legend was tragedy. The next seasons were cruel. Rains came late, and bamboo forests bloomed all at once, a sign of death. After flowering, the bamboo died for years before regrowing. Entire valleys turned barren. The giants wandered farther in search of food, crossing rivers, climbing hills where no bamboo grew. Many starved. Some ventured near human settlements, drawn by the scent of fruit or carcass. They were met not with mercy, but with fear. Stones flew, spears followed. The gentle ones that approached too closely never returned. In the high caves of Guangxi, a small group survived. They nested among stalagmites, sleeping through the heat of the day, emerging at dusk to forage the last groves that clung to the cliffs. Their numbers dwindled, mothers without mates, infants without milk. Still they endured, held together by instinct and memory. One night, lightning struck the ridge above. Flames spread down the slope, fast as wind. The giants awoke to a world ablaze once more. The youngest cried, a thin, high sound swallowed by thunder. The oldest lifted their voices in answering roars, deep and mournful. The fire reached the cave mouth and turned the night into a furnace. By dawn, the valley below was silent. Smoke rose in slow spirals. Only blackened bamboo remained. From that day forward, the Gigantopithecus ceased to appear near human lands. They retreated beyond rivers and mountains, into jungles so deep even the hunters dared not follow. And so, to the people of fire, it seemed as though the giants had vanished entirely, taken by the spirits, erased by gods. But somewhere, in a green ravine veiled by mist, a single survivor still moved. An old male, his fur gray, his steps heavy. He leaned against a broken tree, breathing hard. The world he knew had ended, yet he lingered, a living echo of an age that could not let go. Far below, smoke curled again into the sky, marking another human camp. The old giant watched it for a long time. His eyes reflected the red light, small, trembling, eternal. He turned and disappeared into the forest that would soon forget him. And thus, without war, without warning, without witness, the reign of the gentle giants came to an end. The jungle was silent before the storm. Clouds pressed low over the valley, and the air smelled of rain and fear. For days, the Homo erectus hunting party had followed the river's curve into unknown territory, chasing the scent of wild pigs. The trees grew taller here, the shadows deeper. None of them realized they had entered the last stronghold of the forest giants. At dusk, they reached a clearing littered with cracked bamboo and broken branches. The ground was soft with prints, huge round depressions filled with water. The leader crouched, running his hand along one of them. It was deep enough to drown a foot. Something enormous lived here. The group grew uneasy. They whispered and gestured, glancing into the dark forest. The smallest among them picked up a piece of dung the size of a stone and sniffed. The smell was sweet, heavy, herbivore. Harmless, perhaps, but the weight of silence pressed harder. Then came the sound, a deep, resonant thunk, bamboo snapping rhythmically close by. One of the hunters pointed, through the mist, movement, a shadow swaying among the trees. The shape grew clearer as it approached, a wall of fur, golden brown beneath the dying light. Its massive hands pulled stalks from the earth, as if they were grass. It tore them apart and chewed, slow and patient. The men froze. None had ever seen a creature so large, so human. It stood upright at times, walked on all fours at others. Its face, flat, broad, with deep-set eyes, turned toward them, unhurried. The leader raised a hand, motioning for stillness. The air crackled with tension. Even the insects seemed to hold their breath. For a few heartbeats, they simply stared at each other. Firelight met ancient gaze. Mind met mind. Then, a baby Gigantopithecus appeared beside the giant, clinging to its mother's fur. The humans gasped softly. The sound broke the fragile peace. The mother reacted instantly. A roar erupted, shaking leaves from the canopy. She rose to her full height, towering twice as tall as the tallest man. Birds exploded from the trees in panic. The hunters stumbled back, shouting. One dropped his spear. Another raised his torch in defense, waving it wildly. The flame caught a dry stalk. Fire flared up between them. The ape bellowed again, furious and terrified, shielding its infant. It swung its arm, striking a tree trunk with a force that split the bark. The humans fled. They ran through the undergrowth, branches whipping their faces, hearts pounding. Behind them, the roars echoed, not pursuit, but warning. The jungle trembled with the sound. When they reached the river, they collapsed beside the water, gasping. Smoke from the burning stalks drifted after them, curling like ghosts over the surface. No one spoke for a long time. Then, the youngest hunter whispered something, a sound that meant monster, or perhaps God. They stayed by the river until dawn, too afraid to sleep. The night was full of noises, the distant calls of apes, the creak of bamboo, the whisper of rain beginning to fall. At first light, they crept back toward the clearing. The fire had burned out. The air was thick with the smell of ash and trampled earth. The giants were gone. Only blackened stalks and enormous footprints remained. The leader approached one of them, the print still warm from the morning sun. He placed his hand inside it. His fingers barely reached halfway. He looked up at the others. No one said a word. They understood. This forest was not theirs. Not yet. That evening they gathered around the fire and told the story again and again. Each retelling made the giant taller, louder, more powerful. The baby became two. The mother became a demon. The roar became thunder. Fear shaped the tale, turning memory into myth. But beneath the fear, something else stirred. Fascination. They had looked into eyes that reflected understanding. The creature was not just an animal. It knew. And in that realization lay the first spark of rivalry. From that day on, they carried more torches into the forest. They hunted deeper, moved bolder. The memory of the encounter burned within them, not as a warning, but as a challenge. For the Gigantopithecus, the memory was different. In the same valley, the mother held her trembling infant close as the smell of smoke faded from her fur. She remembered the fire, the light that hurt her eyes, the strange creatures who shouted but did not kill. She felt a fear she had never known before, not of predators, but of the small beings who walked with fire. For millions of years, strength had been enough. But that night she sensed that strength was no longer the highest law of the forest. Two intelligences had seen each other, and both understood instinctively that there was not enough world for both. The rains came, heavy and relentless, turning the forest floor to rivers of red clay. Thunder rolled over the hills, but beneath its roar something older and more dangerous stirred. The memory of fear. Weeks had passed since the first encounter. The hunters could not forget it. The shadow taller than any tree, the sound that made their bones vibrate. They spoke of it every night, their voices flickering with the fire. Some called the giant a spirit, others a beast, but all agreed on one thing: they would see it again. Curiosity became obsession. Fear turned to defiance. The leader of the band, scarred across his arm by a boar tusk, decided they would return to the Valley of the Giants, not to flee this time, but to hunt. The forest, he said, belonged to the fire-bearers now. At dawn they prepared, fire-hardened spears, sharp-edged stones, torches wrapped in resin-soaked bark. The rain had stopped. Mist clung low, turning the world to smoke. They moved in silence, their bare feet pressing prints beside the larger ones that still marked the ground. The clearing lay ahead, the same place where they had first seen the giants. It was quiet. Too quiet. A single broken bamboo still smoldered from an old lightning strike. Steam rose in thin spirals. Then came a sound, low, rhythmic breathing. Close. From behind the trees, a Gigantopithecus stepped forward. It was a male, enormous, broad-shouldered, his fur streaked with gray. Scars crossed his chest, remnants of an old fight. His eyes were dark, almost human. He did not roar. He simply watched them. The hunters froze, hearts hammering. They could see his breath in the cold air, hear the deep rumble of his chest. He was alone. They did not yet realize why. A second sound came, a soft cry from behind him. A young one. Hidden at the edge of the grove, a juvenile Gigantopithecus clung to a fallen tree, watching with wide eyes. The hunters saw it. The leader's grip tightened on his spear. He gestured. Two men circled left, one right. Slowly. Quietly. The old giant turned his head, sensing movement. His jaw clenched. He stepped forward, between the humans and his child. The forest held its breath. A bird shrieked from above. The leader flinched and threw. The spear flew through the air and struck the giant's shoulder. The sound that followed was like the world breaking in half. The Gigantopithecus roared, a sound that shattered the stillness, echoing through the valley like thunder made of rage. He charged. The earth shook beneath him. The humans scattered, shouting. One tripped, another fell under the swing of a massive arm that crushed his ribs with a single blow. Blood splashed across the bamboo. The leader snatched a burning torch from the ground and thrust it forward. Fire hissed, catching the giant's fur. The smell of singed hair filled the air. The ape recoiled, howling, batting at the flame. The hunters regrouped, circling. Spears flashed, striking again and again. Some bounced off muscle. One found the throat. The giant staggered, clutching at the wound, his great hands slick with blood. The young one screamed, a high, keening sound that pierced the rain-soaked forest. The dying Gigantopithecus turned his head toward the child, reached out once more, and then fell. The impact shook leaves from the trees. Silence. Only the crackle of fire and the sob of the young one remained. It fled into the darkness, vanishing among the trees. The hunters stood around the body, panting, shaking. None spoke. The leader approached the fallen titan, touching its chest as if to be sure it was real. The skin was hot beneath his hand, the heart still fluttering faintly. He looked into its face, and in that moment saw not a beast, but a being. Its eyes, now dulling, still held reflection. It had protected its child, just as any human would. For the first time, victory did not taste like triumph. They burned the body, perhaps to keep scavengers away, perhaps to send its spirit into the sky. Smoke rose high, merging with the clouds. The hunters watched it until it disappeared. When they returned to their cave, the tribe gathered to hear the story. The leader spoke slowly, with firelight flickering in his eyes. He told of a beast that stood like a mountain, of thunder that came from its mouth, of a battle between fire and flesh. But he did not speak of the child. The legend of the fire killers began that night, a tale of how humans had defeated the forest's mightiest creature. But deep within the same jungle, a pair of eyes still watched. The orphaned young Gigantopithecus moved silently through the trees, carrying memories it could not understand, of pain, of fire, of death. For centuries, those memories would echo in the minds of its kind. A fear of light, a hatred of flame. And in the blood of humans, too, something lingered. The knowledge that power could destroy what awe had once protected. That day the forest changed forever. The giants no longer ruled by presence. The humans ruled by fear. And in the silent rain that followed, the ashes of the fallen mingled with the soil, marking the exact moment when two worlds, one ancient, one rising, truly collided. The world began to cool. It happened slowly, too slowly for any creature to understand. But the signs were everywhere. Winds came from the north, colder, drier. Rains that once fell every month now came only twice a year. The rivers receded, the air turned brittle, and the once endless jungles of Southeast Asia began to thin like hair on an old man's scalp. The bamboo forests, the green heart of the Gigantopithecus world, began to die. It started with silence. Birds vanished first, then the cicadas. The air grew empty, heavy with dust. The bamboos stopped flowering, stopped growing. Stalks that once reached 10 meters turned yellow and hollow, collapsing under their own weight. For Gigantopithecus blacki, the change was catastrophe. The giant apes were built for abundance. Their massive bodies demanded mountains of food each day. But now each dawn brought less. They wandered longer, climbed higher, and found only brittle leaves. Their jaws, designed to crush bamboo, ground against emptiness. Fossil evidence tells the story in enamel, teeth worn down to the roots, like stones eroded by time. Their bones grew thinner, their bodies smaller, their faces longer with hunger. Far below, in the valleys where rivers still ran, Homo erectus thrived. Fire kept them warm in the cold nights. Stone tools sliced through tough meat. Their bodies shrank slightly, an adaptation to leaner times, but their minds sharpened. They learned to follow migrating herds, to shape new tools for digging and cutting. The humans had what the giants did not: flexibility. Where Gigantopithecus saw disaster, Homo erectus saw opportunity. In one valley where the forest met the plain, a tribe of humans gathered around a dying fig tree. The air smelled of ash and old fruit. They were thinner now, their ribs visible beneath the skin, but their eyes burned with thought. The leader, the same scarred man who had slain the giant, crouched near the fire, sharpening a stone blade. Around him, the young ones murmured. They had not seen the giants for many moons, but their elders still spoke of them as monsters, as gods, as ghosts. That night they heard a sound, deep, distant, like thunder rolling over stone. The scarred man rose, spear in hand, eyes scanning the dark forest. The sound came again, closer. A low moan followed by the crash of falling bamboo. At the edge of the clearing, a shape appeared, massive, lumbering, starved. A Gigantopithecus. Its fur hung in tatters. Its belly was sunken, its ribs showing like the slats of a cage. It stumbled forward, too weak to be terrifying, too big to ignore. Its eyes caught the glow of the fire, not with fury this time, but with desperation. It had come seeking food. The humans backed away, gripping their spears. The scarred man raised his torch, shouting, trying to drive it off, but the giant did not move. It reached down, grabbed a branch from the ground, and chewed it. Dry wood, not bamboo, splintering between its teeth. The fire crackled. The humans hesitated. One of them, a woman, threw a bundle of fruit toward it. The giant sniffed, then lifted the fruit delicately in its massive fingers. It ate slowly, cautiously, eyes never leaving the humans. For a brief moment there was no fear, no battle, only hunger and understanding. Then a child cried out. The sound startled the beast. It flinched, dropped the fruit, and stepped backward, right into the fire pit. Flames leapt up, licking its fur. The roar that followed shook the forest. The humans screamed, spears flew. The giant thrashed wildly, half blind with terror, trying to smother the flames with its hands. It stumbled into a tree, crashed to the ground, and lay still. Smoke rose from its body. The fire crackled on, indifferent. When dawn came, the tribe stood over the corpse. None spoke. The scarred man touched the burnt skin and frowned. The beast was thin, brittle, not the mighty god of old, just a shadow. They did not burn this one. Instead, they carved the meat. Hunger had erased reverence. That day the tribe feasted, and far away in another dying valley, the last herds of Gigantopithecus moved north, searching for forests that no longer existed. Within a few generations, the jungles that had fed them were gone, replaced by dry woodlands, grass, and dust. The last of the great apes climbed a ridge one evening and looked down upon a land they no longer recognized. Below, smoke rose from human fires, small, steady, eternal. The giants watched, too weak to challenge, too proud to descend. They turned away, vanishing into the last patches of green, unaware that they were walking out of history. And somewhere in the night, beside a dying campfire, a human elder whispered to a child, "The gods have left the forest." He was right, and the forest would never be the same again. Hunger changes the laws of a forest. When bellies are full, the old rhythms hold. Dawn for feeding, noon for shade, dusk for the long calls that stitch one valley to the next. But when emptiness grips the gut, customs rot. Day moves into night without meaning. Branches snap in places that should be silent. Eyes appear at the edge of firelight, not from curiosity, but from need. The need had come for the last Gigantopithecus. It began with the young. Their cries grew high and thin, losing the roundness of contentment. Mothers pressed fruitless shoots into their hands, coaxing them to chew bark for water. Males who once patrolled the ridges with easy confidence drifted like ghosts between dead bamboo, their chests hollow, their steps uncertain. The old ones lowered themselves to the ground more often, not to rest, but because standing was a choice the body no longer afforded. Far below, the fires of Homo erectus multiplied. Not many, never many, but enough to dot the river margins like little stars fallen to earth. Smoke braided with mist in the mornings. Fat hissed on embers at night. Children laughed. Men and women sharpened tools until the stone edges whispered. They did not know that desperation, heavy as storm air, had started to roll down from the heights. The first raids were not raids at all. A shadow at dusk. A great hand reaching into a basket, clumsy, almost gentle, lifting a gourd or a clutch of figs. a grunt, low and apologetic. The humans startled, shouted, waved torches. The giant flinched and turned away, retreating into bamboo that no longer sheltered. But soon, fruit was gone. Tubers were gone. The trees themselves offered only dry wood and memory. One moonless night, when the river shrank to thin silver and frogs lined the banks like pebbles, the scarred leader's camp heard a sound nobody mistook. A deep cough, wet and heavy, from lungs rimed with smoke. The campfire snapped. Everyone froze. Then the ground trembled, just a little, and a vast silhouette blotted the stars beyond the cave mouth. A Gigantopithecus stood at the edge of firelight. It swayed, not in threat, but with the weakness of a thing too large to fall. The heat pushed against its face. Its eyes, dark discs rimmed with red, flicked from the flames to the baskets to the people, and back again. The smell of cooked marrow had drawn it from the ridge. It had followed the scent like a thread through a maze of dead grove and dust. The woman who had once thrown fruit took a breath that trembled and reached for a bundle of roots. She tossed them softly, so they thudded on ash rather than cracked. The giant flinched, then stooped with that old careful grace and lifted a root between finger and thumb. It chewed, slowly, once, twice. The eyes closed, as if the memory of food alone could nourish. A child whimpered. A hand covered the child's mouth. The giant kept eating. The thief watched. The tribe watched, their fear braided now with something harder to name. Pity, perhaps, or a grief too large for words. Then the wind changed. Smoke rolled into the ape's face. It coughed again, deep and wrenching, and stumbled forward, catching its weight on a post that held the drying rack of meat. The rack broke. Meat fell. The tribe surged to protect their winter. Fear snapped shut like a trap. Torches lunged. Ironwood spears jabbed. The giant threw up its arms and the world narrowed to sparks and shouts and the hot animal stink of terror. A torch kissed fur. Flame took in a hungry line. The giant bellowed and lurched sideways, not to crush but to escape, to breathe. Its shoulder struck the cave wall. Rock answered with a crack. The roof shed dust in a fine sigh. "Back!" the scarred man barked, voice raw, body already moving to flank. 2 hunters obeyed. One stumbled, and the giant's knee clipped him so lightly it looked like a touch. The man pinwheeled through firelight and lay still, chest fluttering like a trapped bird. The woman with the roots stepped between spear and titan, arms out, voice low, a sound more soothing than a word. For a second the forest remembered itself. The giant's breath slowed, its eyes steadied on hers, and in that fragile stillness anything else might have happened. But hunger is a tide, and fear rides it. From behind, a young hunter thrust. Stone point bit hide, skated, then found purchase under the arm where muscle thinned. The giant roared, more shock than rage, snatched the spear and snapped it in two. The stump in its flesh burned. It turned, slow, wounded, and every torch flared brighter in the wobbling wet of its eyes. The scarred man threw. His spear struck higher in the clavicle, a good shot born from old practice and newer terror. Blood came dark and thick. The giant staggered. The fire found fresh fur. Someone screamed. It might have been the child. It might have been the woman. It might have been the forest. The great ape did not charge. It backed, step by careful step, away from the light, away from the shouts, toward the river glinting like a blade below. It did not look away from them. It kept its gaze until the last second, then turned and slipped into blackness so complete the fire seemed suddenly small enough to cup. The tribe stood panting. Every breath sounded like guilt. At dawn they followed the drag of blood to the water's edge. There, reeds were flattened in a crescent, as if a moon had fallen and lifted itself again. In the shallows, a smear of red stretched downstream into the new day. No body, only the silent work of current and fish. They lit a smaller fire than usual that night. The raids stopped for a time, but hungry bodies cannot hold distance forever. As the cold strengthened its hand on the hills, a different giant came, younger, less careful. It shouldered the drying rack aside, seized a basket, and, when a boy tried to snatch it back, swept the boy with the back of a hand. The boy flew. He did not rise. Something broke in the tribe then. Not pity, not caution. A cord somewhere deep that had held two worlds apart by a few frayed strands. The response was not a hunt, it was a plan. They watched the game trails. They counted nights between coughs on the ridge. They noticed where the giants crossed the river, where the banks slumped into mud that clutched at ankles. On the third dusk they set fires not at camp, but in a ring low and mean, where breeze and bank would shepherd smoke into a bowl, and at the bowl's narrow throat they dug a trench with hands and antler picks, disguising its lip with reeds and ash. The setting sun found bamboo glowing like coals. Smoke hugged the earth. The air tasted of old marrow and fear. When the first shadow came, it paused, as if remembering gentler nights. It stepped forward. The earth gave way. The trench swallowed a leg, then a shoulder. The giant crashed onto its side with a sound that sent egrets bursting from the far marsh. It tried to rise. Spears pinned, torches hissed. A net of vines, new in the tribe's memory, copied from spider and creeper, fell across the heaving chest and held just long enough. The scarred man approached. His eyes were river stone. He lifted a fire-hardened stave etched with soot. The woman's hand found his forearm. He didn't shake it off. He didn't hear it. The world had narrowed to the terrible arithmetic of survival. He thrust. Once. Twice. A third time, to be sure. When it was done, the forest did not move for a long while. They used everything, hide, fat, bone, not from savagery, from poverty. The children ate until their eyes were bright again. The elders chewed in silence, watching the ridge as if expecting the shape of judgment. None came, or rather, it came not as a shape, but as absence. In the following weeks, the night calls ceased. The cough on the ridge fell quiet. The heavy prints that crossed the river each dawn did not return. The bamboo, what little lived, stood unbent. The forest sounded bigger, emptier, like a drum after a hand lifts away. The scarred man slept poorly. In dreams he heard reeds part and saw eyes the size of coals looking back through smoke. He woke with the taste of ash in his mouth and would go to the cave mouth to stare at stars. The woman stood sometimes beside him. They said nothing. What word could hold both gratitude and grief? By the time the dry season broke, the tribe had changed in ways no bone will record. They had learned the geometry of the ambush, the patience of the ring fire, the use of net and trench. But they had also learned another lesson, colder and clearer, that between two intelligences sharing one shrinking forest, mercy is the first luxury to starve. On a far ridge where the last green held like moss in a crack, an old Gigantopithecus lifted his head and listened. The world that had sung his name was quiet. He closed his eyes. Somewhere below, thin smoke rose, steady, competent, enduring. He turned his face into the wind and breathed until breath itself felt like memory. Before long there would be no giants left to raid, no cough to announce the ridge. The hunger would not end, but its teacher would. In that ending, a new rule set began, one written not in bamboo and shadow, but in fire and plan. And the jungle, patient as stone, would keep the secret until caves learned to speak. There are moments in prehistory when time seems to stop, when the last heartbeat of a dying species echoes through the earth, and the silence that follows is forever. For the Gigantopithecus, that moment had come. The forests that once covered the valleys of southern China and northern Vietnam had withered into patches of dying green. The air that once shimmered with the hum of cicadas now hung still and gray. The wind carried only dust and the faint scent of decay, bamboo ash, animal bone, human smoke. The giants no longer roamed in herds. They moved alone now, solitary phantoms, following memories older than hunger. Their footprints still pressed into the soil, but the prints never overlapped. There were no others to follow them. At dawn, an old male stood upon a ridge of rock staring down into a valley he no longer recognized. Where once had been a sea of bamboo, lay open scrub and human fires. He remembered, though memory to him was scent and sound rather than thought, the sweetness of new shoots, the laughter of young ones wrestling in the shade, the songs of birds that had not sung in years. He stood until the sun burned his eyes, then turned toward the caves. The shadows were cooler, and he was so very tired. Inside the limestone hollows, bones already told the story of extinction. Skeletons of giants lay in layers of clay, gnawed by rodents, cracked by time. Between them, scattered human tools, flaked stones, charred sticks, bits of ochre rubbed smooth by fingers. Evidence that the heirs of the forest had inherited its tombs. Far below, the people of fire flourished. Their settlements had grown into small, organized clusters. They built rings of stone around their hearths, sharpened spears with patient rhythm, and stored food for seasons ahead. They had learned to weave grass into mats, to dry meat, to shape bone into points. The rhythm of survival had become method, the first faint heartbeat of civilization. Sometimes, they still spoke of the giants. The elders' voices dropped low as though afraid the shadows might listen. They told the young that the forest kings had once ruled the earth, but that their pride had burned them. They said the gods had chosen man because man carried fire in his heart. But some, especially the old, still dreamed of the giants. They remembered the thunder of their steps, the strange sadness in their eyes. When lightning flashed over the hills, they whispered the name their ancestors had given. The Watchers of the Bamboo. Those watchers were gone now. One evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, a young hunter followed animal tracks through the dead bamboo and came upon something vast lying motionless by the riverbank. At first he thought it a hill of fur. Then he saw the arm, enormous, still curled as if shielding a child. Flies gathered in clouds around the mouth. The smell was sweet, heavy, final. He called for others. The tribe came, torches flickering. They circled the body, keeping distance. It was not fear but reverence that held them. Even in death, the Gigantopithecus looked like a fallen god, its jaws slack, its chest like a collapsed mountain. The scarred man, older now, approached. His beard was streaked with gray, his eyes lined from smoke and memory. He touched the creature's hand, massive, cold. He looked at its broken teeth, its cracked lips, and the hollow beneath its ribs. Hunger had done what fire could not. He said nothing. He only nodded once, a gesture of respect, and stepped back. That night, the humans built no fire. They sat in the dark and listened to the river move. Somewhere far away, thunder muttered, or perhaps it was only the memory of a roar. The rains came heavy that season. The last of the bamboo rotted where it fell. Mudslides swallowed caves, sealing bones within. The rivers shifted their paths. The valleys filled, emptied, filled again. Layer by layer, the world buried the giants in silence. Generations passed. Children grew without ever seeing the shadow of the great apes. The word for forest king faded from their tongues. They no longer looked for eyes in the trees or trembled at thunder. The forest at last belonged to man alone. But something had changed in the people as well. The joy of the hunt dulled. The fires felt smaller. The nights seemed longer. It was as if, in killing the giants, they had stolen a piece of their own reflection, the reminder that they too were creatures of the wild, bound by hunger and time. One night the scarred man dreamed. He was walking through a valley of mist when a sound reached him. Slow, deep, familiar. He turned, and there, among ghostly bamboo, stood a Gigantopithecus. Not the one he had slain, not the one that burned, but something larger, older, the spirit of them all. It looked at him without anger, only sorrow. Then it turned and walked into the mist, each step leaving no trace behind. When he woke, the fire had gone out. He never lit it again. The fossil record tells us the rest. By around 300,000 years ago, Gigantopithecus blacki had vanished completely. No more teeth, no more bones. The largest primate to ever walk the earth was gone, leaving only fragments of jaw and legend behind. But extinction is not erasure. Every breath we take, every forest we burn carries echoes of that ancient balance. Strength versus adaptability, power versus intellect, the beast versus the maker of fire. And somewhere in the dark memory of humankind, a shape still moves, vast, gentle, watching. The forest king may have fallen, but its shadow endures. Not in the jungle, but in us. The wind blew through the mouth of the cave like a whisper from another time. It carried the scent of damp stone, mold, and something older, the memory of a forest now gone. Deep inside, beneath dripping stalactites, a single heartbeat still echoed, slow, heavy. The last Gigantopithecus was dying. Its fur had turned gray, matted with dirt and ash. The skin beneath was paper-thin over bone. The great hands that once snapped bamboo now trembled as they scraped moss from the cave wall. Each movement was labor, each breath an echo of 1,000,000 ancestors. Outside, the world had changed beyond recognition. The forest that once fed and hid it was gone, replaced by dry plains and scattered trees. Rivers had moved, prey had vanished, and fire, the endless human fire, now marked the horizon every night like the eyes of a predator that never slept. The old giant did not fear the fire anymore. It simply didn't understand it. To its dimming mind, the glow was part of the sky now, another sun that never set. One night, as the rain came again, a lone Homo erectus wandered into the valley. He was young, thin, his tribe gone, killed perhaps or scattered. The rain had washed away their trails. He sought shelter and found the cave. When he entered, he did not see the giant at first. He only saw the faint glint of water on stone and heard the steady rhythm of dripping. He moved deeper, clutching his fire bundle close, afraid of the dark but more afraid of being alone. Then he heard it, a low exhale that wasn't his own. The sound filled the cave like wind through a hollow tree. He froze. The air smelled of musk and earth and age. He raised his torch, and the flame caught the reflection of eyes. Two vast, amber eyes staring back. The staring back. The Gigantopithecus sat hunched in the shadows, watching him. Its breath came slow, misting in the cold air. Its face was a map of wrinkles, its eyes deep wells of weariness. It did not move, did not growl, only watched. The human trembled. His instincts screamed to run, but something, some ancient recognition, held him still. He saw not a monster, but a being, a presence. He lowered his torch slightly, letting the light fall softer. The flame painted both their faces in gold and red, reflections of the same spark, the same fragile life. The giant blinked, slowly, almost curiously. Then, with effort, it reached out one hand. Not to strike, to feel. The man stepped closer. His breath shook. He extended his own hand, tiny in comparison, until his fingers brushed coarse fur. It was warm, trembling, alive. For a heartbeat, two worlds, separated by millions of years of evolution, touched. The giant's hand rested on the ground again. Its eyes closed. The man stayed there, kneeling in the dim glow as the breathing grew shallower, slower, until it stopped. Silence. He waited a long time before moving. Then, with trembling fingers, he set the torch into a crack in the rock, letting it burn until the cave glowed faintly. He looked at the body one last time. The giant seemed to be sleeping, head bowed, like a mountain that had decided to rest. He placed a stone by its side. A simple gesture, though he did not yet know the meaning of burial. It was instinct, perhaps, or gratitude. Then he left the cave. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds broke open to reveal the first pale stars. He looked back once more at the dark mouth of the cave, the last home of the last Titan. Then he walked away, following the faint glow of firelight in the distance, the signal of his kind, the survivors. Behind him, the cave filled with silence. Drip, drip. A drop of water landed on the giant's brow and rolled down like a tear. When the sun rose, its light reached the valley floor, glinting off wet stone. The forest no longer roared. It whispered. The echoes of giant footsteps had vanished. The world felt lighter, emptier. And somewhere within the minds of the living, a memory took root. The image of a creature too powerful for survival, too gentle for the world that replaced it. That memory would pass through generations, reshaped into stories of forest gods, hairy men, the watchers in the dark. They would never know his name, but they would remember the feeling that they had once stood in the presence of something greater, and that it had looked back at them and forgiven them before it was gone. 500,000 years turned to dust. The rains carved valleys, Mountains eroded, rivers changed their beds, and the bones of titans sank deeper into the earth, sealed beneath layers of silence. Then, one day, human hands found them again. It was 1935, in a limestone cave in southern China. The man was not a scientist, only a villager digging for dragon bones, ancient fossils ground into powder and sold as medicine. He struck stone, pried it loose, and found something strange. A massive molar, yellowed, heavy as a river stone, its roots thick and blunt. He sold it to a merchant. The merchant sold it to a scholar. And that scholar, a German paleontologist named Ralph von Königswald, looked at the tooth and saw the ghost of a world no one remembered. He named it Gigantopithecus blacki, the giant ape of black, in honor of the man who first studied it. Soon, more fossils appeared. Jaws big enough to crush bone, teeth worn smooth by grinding bamboo. Together, they told a story of a creature unlike any living ape, one that had stood 3 meters tall and weighed over half a ton. A herbivore, yes, but a giant among primates. Königswald was fascinated. He carried the fossils across a continent at war, hiding them from bombings and looters. When peace returned, he wrote in his journal, "I believe this was the largest ape that ever lived, and perhaps once it saw us." At first, no one believed him. Science, like memory, resists ghosts. But the fossils spoke clearly. Their enamel held traces of bamboo phytoliths, microscopic plant crystals that proved their diet. The sediments around them dated to 500,000 years ago, the time of Homo erectus. And in those same layers of clay, archaeologists found stone tools, hearth remains, and the charred bones of hunted animals. Man and giant had lived, and perhaps died, side by side. In one Vietnamese cave, Tum Quyen, the evidence grew even stronger. There, embedded in red earth, lay both the jaw of a Gigantopithecus and the flint flakes of early humans. The tools were sharp-edged, shaped by fire, stained with ancient ash. The message was unmistakable. 2 species had shared this space. For decades, scientists debated what that meant. Did humans hunt the giants, or merely scavenge their remains? Was coexistence peaceful, or did the two compete for land and food? There are no clear answers. The fossils, like witnesses long dead, speak only through fragments. But each discovery deepens the story. In one jawbone, researchers found uneven wear, evidence that its owner had chewed harder plants near the end of life when bamboo was gone. Hunger had scarred even its teeth. In another, chemical analysis revealed the trace of soot, as if the bone had once lain near a fire. Fire and famine, man and giant. The same motifs repeating across the eons. And so, through stone and ash, we began to see the truth. Gigantopithecus was not a myth, not a legend, not a fantasy born from superstition. It was real, and it had walked the earth beside us. Under the cold lights of laboratories, the bones were cleaned, measured, scanned. Digital reconstructions filled computer screens. A massive face, broad jaw, deep eyes. When the first realistic model appeared, some scientists felt uneasy. The expression was too familiar, too human. A creature not unlike us, yet impossibly different. Gentle in design, tragic in fate. Königswald once said that when he looked into the empty sockets of its skull, he saw something haunting. It is as though evolution paused here, a monument to what could have been, had the world been kinder. And indeed, the more we studied, the more we saw ourselves reflected in them. not in their strength, but in their loss. Every species leaves a memory behind, bones, tools, words. But extinction leaves something heavier, the weight of absence. When night falls in those same caves today, the air still smells faintly of wet limestone. Bats flutter, water drips, and the stone walls whisper the same story told by every fossil. That there was once a time when we were not alone. Outside, at the dig site, a campfire flickers. Young archaeologists gather around it, their laptops glowing like new embers of discovery. They hold in their hands teeth older than history, the last remnants of the forest kings. One of them turns a fossil over gently and whispers, "It's strange. They vanished, but somehow we remember them." The others nod. In the dark, the firelight gleams off the tooth, just as it gleamed off a torch 500,000 years ago. The circle closes. The flames dance. The shadows move. And for a moment, it feels as if something vast and quiet watches again from the edge of the forest, unseen, but not forgotten. Even after bones turn to dust, memory survives in stories. Long after the last Gigantopithecus vanished from the jungles of Asia, whispers about them endured, reshaped by fear, awe, and time. When humans forgot their names, they gave them new ones. In the high plateaus of the Himalayas, travelers spoke of Yeti, downright the abominable snowman, a towering fur-clad creature whose footprints marked the ice. Across the vast forests of North America, tales of Sasquatch and Bigfoot haunted the edge of civilization. Enormous shapes glimpsed between trees, leaving behind nothing but echoes and prints. Far to the south, in the steaming jungles of Sumatra and Borneo, villagers told of orang pendek and ibu gogo, small or large, hairy beings that walked upright and stole fruit in the night. To modern ears, these sound like legends, but to the ancient brain, the same brain that once trembled at the sight of firelight reflecting in a giant's eyes, they are memory. Anthropologists call it cultural residue, fragments of truth carried in myth, long after the facts are forgotten. The idea that somewhere, deep in our collective past, humanity met creatures so strange, so powerful, that their presence imprinted itself on our DNA of storytelling. The earliest myths share a common theme: the forest giant. They live between light and darkness, close to nature but beyond understanding. They are never fully beast, never fully God. They watch from the shadows, sometimes curious, sometimes angry, always lonely. How could cultures separated by oceans all imagine the same being? Science offers one answer: shared ancestry of fear. For hundreds of thousands of years, Homo erectus, Homo floresiensis, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Gigantopithecus coexisted across continents. For early humans, the world was never just theirs. The forest moved at night. The mountains echoed with voices not human. Our species learned caution the hard way, and caution evolved into story. When the last of those other humans vanished, the tales remained. Each generation retold them, first as warning, then as wonder. The people of Tibet carved giant footprints into stone, claiming they belonged to snow spirits. In ancient China, bamboo scrolls spoke of man-beasts who guarded the mountains and vanished in fire. In Vietnam and Laos, villagers still tell stories of Nguoi Rung, the forest people, tall silent figures seen at dusk, their faces half hidden by fur and sadness. Science and superstition rarely meet, but here they walk side by side. The fossils of Gigantopithecus were found in the very lands where such stories persist. Coincidence, perhaps, or continuity? Because myth is the memory of those who could not write. Imagine the first humans migrating through a misty valley 50,000 years ago. They see shadows moving in the world. Trees, shapes too large, too human. They tell their children to stay close to the fire. Generations later, those children tell their own. Beware the watchers of the forest. They walk when men forget to look. Thousands of years pass. The giants are gone, but the story endures. It becomes a bedtime tale, a tribal warning, a campfire ghost. It changes names: Yeti, Bigfoot, Almas, Yowie, but the bones of the tale remain the same. The forest once had kings, and man dethroned them. Now we remember them as monsters because that is easier than remembering guilt. Modern science tries to draw a clean line between fossil and folklore, yet sometimes the two blur. In 2003, on the Indonesian island of Flores, scientists unearthed the remains of Homo floresiensis, the so-called hobbit, a tiny human species that lived until just 12,000 years ago. Local villagers, when shown the bones, nodded calmly. Yes, they said, that's the Ibu Gogo. She used to live in the caves, our grandparents told us. The past, it seems, never really leaves. It just waits for us to remember. And what of Gigantopithecus? The myths may have kept its spirit alive long after the bones were buried. Perhaps the stories of the Yeti are not inventions at all, but echoes of a time when our ancestors stood face to face with true giants. A time when intelligence came in more than one form, and the forest was filled with eyes that thought, remembered, mourned. Every culture that still whispers about hairy men in the woods keeps a fragment of that truth alive, an unconscious tribute to the creatures that once shared our dawn. Even now, when explorers report footprints too large to be human, or strange cries from deep jungle ravines, part of us listens. We want it to be true, not because we crave monsters, but because we crave connection. To know that somewhere, in some untouched corner of the earth, a piece of the ancient world still breathes. Because if the giants are truly gone, then so is the mystery that once defined us. And maybe that is the real extinction. Tonight, under electric lights instead of torches, we still gather to tell stories of the forest kings. We still glance into the trees and imagine movement. The fire may be brighter, the fear smaller, but the longing remains the same. For every myth is a memory, and every fossil a story too heavy for silence. Extinction is never absolute. It is transformation. When a species disappears, traces of it remain, not only in fossils and sediments, but in the living things that follow. The Gigantopithecus left no direct descendants, yet their presence still lingers in the bloodline of the forests, and in ways more subtle, within us. For millions of years, humanity's ancestors shared the earth with other kinds of people. Not one lineage, but many. Homo erectus, Homo habilis, Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo floresiensis, and others now lost to dust. Each shaped the other. Each encounter changed the story of what it meant to be human. When the last of the giants faded, they didn't vanish from memory. They imprinted something deeper. Fear of the dark forest, respect for fire, the uneasy sense that we are being watched when we stand alone among the trees. Evolution writes in the body, but it also writes in the mind. Today, scientists read those ancient scripts in our DNA. Every modern human carries fragments of extinct relatives, Neanderthal genes that help our immune systems, Denisovan sequences that allowed Tibetans to breathe at high altitudes. We are mosaics, patchwork beings built from many vanished worlds. Could there be older echoes still, hidden in the genome's long corridors? Genes too ancient, too faint to trace, yet still whispering through instinct. An inherited memory of giants among the trees. It is not impossible. Our ancestors observed, feared, and sometimes revered beings that looked like them but were not. Those encounters shaped behavior long before language. They taught vigilance, cooperation, and the value of firelight against shadow. They made us social. They made us storytellers. The Gigantopithecus may have vanished, but their existence forced humanity to evolve sharper minds and stronger bonds. Survival, after all, is rarely a competition of strength. It is a test of memory. Those who remember danger live. Those who forget it vanish. Even now, fragments of their story echo through the reflexes we carry unconsciously. Why do children fear the dark? Why do the sounds of cracking wood or distant footsteps in a forest still make our hearts race? Why, in every culture, are monsters imagined as hairy, towering figures just beyond the light? Perhaps because deep in the ancient brain, the part we inherited from our ancestors before words, the image of the forest giant still lingers. Not as myth, but as imprint. A reminder written not in legend, but in neurons. Every night, when early humans gathered around fire, they reinforced that imprint, teaching the young that safety existed only within the circle of flame. Outside, the eyes of giants gleamed. Fire was our defense, and also our boundary between memory and extinction. And yet, fear was not the only inheritance. There was also recognition, the understanding that we are not the center of creation but a continuation of it. The Gigantopithecus taught that there can be intelligence without dominance, strength without cruelty, presence without conquest. When the forest kings fell, humanity took their place, but perhaps also unknowingly their burden. A few years ago, geneticists reconstructed parts of Gigantopithecus DNA from enamel proteins. The analysis confirmed what had long been suspected. They were distant cousins of orangutans, not of us, yet closer in mind than any beast. Their lineage ended, ours continued, but the divide between them and us is thinner than we wish to believe. If one could travel back 500,000 years, stand in the twilights between bamboo trunks, and watch a Gigantopithecus lift its head toward the sound of thunder, the sight would be hauntingly familiar. The eyes would be curious, the gesture thoughtful. For a moment, it would feel like watching ourselves, slowed down, magnified, reflected through time. We like to think evolution is a ladder, step after step upward, each rung superior to the last. But perhaps it is more like a forest, where many trees grow together, some tall, some fallen, each feeding the next with what they leave behind. In that sense, Gigantopithecus never truly died. It became part of the soil from which we grew. Every breath we take in the forests of Asia still passes through air shaped by their lungs, trees fertilized by their bones, rivers cleared by their footsteps. When we cut those forests, we erase not just nature, but ancestry. And when we tell stories of giants, in film, in folklore, in imagination, perhaps we are not inventing at all. Perhaps we are remembering. Remembering what it felt like to stand small beneath something larger than understanding. Remembering that intelligence alone is not enough to deserve the world. Remembering that survival carries a cost, the loneliness of being the last. The Gigantopithecus gave us no monuments, no language, no tools. But they gave us contrast. They taught our kind, through their absence, what it means to endure. We walk upright because they walked before us. We look to the forest with reverence because they once ruled it. And deep inside, when the fire burns low and shadows move at the edge of light, a whisper from that vanished world still stirs. Remember us. Every extinction leaves behind two things: a silence in nature and a mirror for those who survive. When the last Gigantopithecus vanished, the forest exhaled and stilled, but something in us inhaled and remembered. For countless generations, the image of the giant ape has lingered at the edge of human thought, sometimes as fear, sometimes as longing, sometimes as a question. What does it mean to be strong? Strength was never the giant's problem. It could tear a tree from its roots, lift a boulder like a toy. Its bones were thick as beams, its muscles like braided rope. Yet in the end, all that power could not protect it from emptiness, from hunger, from the slow retreat of the forest, from the rise of a smaller, weaker creature that carried fire and intent. In that contrast lies the oldest lesson on Earth. The Gigantopithecus embodied the grandeur of what once was, the age when life grew in size and abundance, when nature herself seemed infinite. Humanity, by contrast, embodied what would come next: adaptation, cunning, the ability to reshape a hostile world. Strength versus intelligence, stability versus change. Two philosophies of existence meeting in a single forest. When the giants fell, we inherited the world, but also their solitude. Because after them, we were alone. Every discovery that makes us powerful also isolates us. Fire separated us from the night. Tools separated us from need. Words separated us from silence. And so, even as our world expanded, our companionship with the other intelligent beings of Earth diminished. Neanderthals, Denisovans, and all the cousins that once shared our firelight faded into legend. Now only we remain, walking through the ruins of kinship, pretending the forest still answers. Perhaps that is why the story of Gigantopithecus haunts us so deeply. It is not merely about what they were, but about what we became. Look at the modern human hand. Delicate, expressive, built for creation and destruction alike. It is the hand that once reached out toward a dying giant in a cave, feeling warmth fade beneath fur. That same hand now builds cities, launches satellites, levels mountains. Yet even surrounded by steel and light, we still tell stories about the forest kings. We still search the jungles for echoes of their footsteps. It is as if some part of us hopes that they are not entirely gone, that nature kept at least one secret for herself. The giants, of course, taught no lessons intentionally. They were not teachers. But the world itself used them as a lesson, a demonstration of what happens when greatness stands still while change flows around it. The Gigantopithecus could not adapt. Humanity could not stop adapting. The result was inevitable. Yet there is a quiet nobility in their fall. They did not destroy. They simply faded. Their extinction was not a war, but a withdrawal. They gave the earth back, piece by piece, to those who would carry it forward. In that surrender lies a kind of grace. Perhaps that is their true legacy, a reminder that evolution is not a ladder of triumphs, but a cycle of inheritance. What one species loses, another inherits. And within that inheritance lies responsibility. If Gigantopithecus taught us anything, it is that survival without humility is hollow. The forest will not always forgive. The climate will not always wait. And power, when it forgets balance, becomes its own extinction. Today, we stand where they once stood, rulers of a fragile world. The forests shrink again. The air warms again. Species vanish at a pace faster than any fire could spread. We have become what we once feared, the destroyers of habitats, the shrinking horizon of others. And in that repetition, history whispers, "Be careful, fire bearers. Even giants fall." Yet, there is hope in remembrance. To remember Gigantopithecus is to honor more than a lost creature. It is to acknowledge that we are not the center of the story, only its current narrator. The Earth's memory stretches longer than ours. It has seen empires of stone and fur and fang come and go. We are just the latest voice in that long chorus. Maybe that is why, when we walk through quiet forests, part of us still listens for the impossible, for the crack of bamboo in the mist, for the sigh of something massive just out of sight. We call it imagination, but maybe it's memory. Maybe the forest remembers too. And in that shared remembrance, the Gigantopithecus lives on, not as fossil or monster, but as metaphor, the part of us that loves the natural world, that fears losing it, that still feels awe in the presence of something larger. That is their inheritance. Because though the Gigantopithecus had strength, it was humanity that learned meaning. And meaning is what survives when everything else is gone. The jungle never forgets. Even after 500,000 years, there are places where the forest still breathes the same air it did in the age of giants. Places where the light falls green and gold, and the silence between bird calls feels alive. Deep within those forgotten valleys, stories continue to walk. In the rainforests of Borneo, hunters whisper of a creature they call batutut, tall as 2 men, covered in dark hair, moving silently through the undergrowth. They say it walks upright, leaves deep prints by the riverbanks, and vanishes before dawn. In Vietnam and Laos, villagers speak of Nui Rum, the forest people. Their eyes glow amber in torchlight. They steal fruit but never attack. In Sumatra, it's Orang Pendek, the short man of the jungle. Small, muscular, and human-like, glimpsed darting between trees at twilight. And high in the Himalayas, the oldest stories of all whisper the same name, Yeti. Every culture tells it differently, yet the rhythm is the same. A shape half seen, a sound in the night, a feeling that something vast and ancient still moves beneath the canopy. Scientists smile politely when asked. They speak of misidentified bears, migrating orangutans, overactive imagination. They point to footprints distorted by melting snow, or to the human brain's need to find faces in the dark. But even they admit a strange truth. These stories are always told where Gigantopithecus once lived. Coincidence, perhaps. Or maybe not. The caves of Guangxi, the bamboo forests of northern Vietnam, the jungles of Borneo and Sumatra, all part of the ancient range of the Forest King. It is as if the earth itself remembers where its giants walked and refuses to let the memory die. Modern explorers have gone looking. In 1967, a team of scientists trekked into the jungles of central Borneo after local tribes described a hairy man stealing bananas. They found prints, wide, flat, too large for a human. The samples were plastered, measured, debated. Nothing conclusive, yet nothing easily dismissed. In 1970, American soldiers stationed in Vietnam reported seeing giant apes during night patrols. Dark shapes crossing trails, too upright, too tall. In 2003 on Flores Island, archaeologists uncovered Homo floresiensis, a real human species once thought impossible. Small, ancient, intelligent. Proof that myths sometimes tell the truth. Now, with satellites and DNA labs, the jungle's mysteries grow smaller every year, but not gone. A recent survey in Laos recorded low, chesty calls in the night. Not gibbon, not orangutan, lower than any known primate. Thermal cameras caught something large moving bipedally through the bamboo groves. The footage was grainy. The scientists said, unidentified. The locals said, the forest remembers. And who can blame them? Science is young. The world is old. For centuries we've walked through the remains of other worlds, oceans that were once deserts, deserts that were once seas. If fossils of Gigantopithecus could sleep unseen for 500,000 years beneath our feet, what else could the earth still be hiding? Maybe the giants truly are gone. Maybe they live only in our imagination. But the imagination, too, is evidence. Evidence, eventually evidence, that something in us still recognizes them. The human mind is not a museum of logic. It is a graveyard of memory. We dream of what we've lost. We tell stories not just to invent, but to remember. When a villager in Borneo describes a tall, silent figure watching from the trees, his words carry the same tremor of awe that an ancestor once felt looking up at Gigantopithecus. The fear, the reverence, the confusion. They have outlived the bones. Perhaps this is what it means to haunt. Not to appear, but to echo. To exist only as reflection, flickering at the corner of our collective vision. In the green heart of Southeast Asia, the rain falls endlessly, erasing footprints, feeding roots, blurring past and present. Somewhere, a night bird calls. A branch snaps. Something heavy moves, slow and sure, through the bamboo. A flashlight beam cuts through the mist. Nothing. Just leaves swaying. Yet the watcher cannot shake the feeling that he was not alone. He turns back toward camp, and in the darkness behind him, two faint eyes glint once before vanishing. Maybe it was illusion. Maybe it was memory. Or maybe, just maybe, the forest still keeps one secret. Because if the jungle could speak, it would whisper what the fossils cannot. They were never monsters. They were us before we forgot how to listen. At the end of every age, two species meet, one fading, one rising. It is not war. It is not mercy. It is the quiet transfer of a crown that neither asked to wear. 500,000 years ago, somewhere in a forest now buried beneath the fields of southern China, the last Gigantopithecus met the first true humans. The world was young then, green, humid, pulsing with life. But it was changing fast, and in that change destiny gathered. The forest giant moved slowly through bamboo taller than houses, its fur streaked with rain, its breath steaming in the morning mist. Nearby, a small band of Homo erectus crouched beside a fire. They were lean, scarred, eyes bright with hunger and calculation. They watched the creature move with a mixture of awe and unease, as if the earth itself walked. Between them stretched the gulf of evolution, power against adaptability, mass against mind, past against future. Neither could see the whole picture, but both sensed what was coming. The Gigantopithecus paused at the edge of the clearing. The humans froze. For a moment there was no sound but the crackle of flame and the heartbeat of rain. Then their eyes met, one pair vast and sorrowful, the other narrow and curious. No spear was thrown, no roar was raised. Only the recognition that one species' dawn was another's dusk. Perhaps the giant turned away first, lumbering back into the forest that had birthed it. Perhaps the humans stayed, adding wood to their fire, not understanding what they had witnessed. That history had just passed its torch. From that moment, everything changed. Forests thinned, rivers shifted. The humans spread, carrying flame and memory, chasing herds and seasons. The giants retreated step by step until the forest ended and time forgot their name. But the meeting was never truly lost. It sank deep into the bones of our myths, the shadows of our dreams. Every story of forest spirits, every legend of watchers in the night, every flicker of fear that makes us glance into the dark, all of it began there, at that clearing, at that fire, at that brief, wordless exchange between two intelligences that once shared a single world. The Gigantopithecus left behind no language, no art, no monument, only memory carved into silence. Yet, in their own way, they shaped us more deeply than any empire could, because they taught us what it means to be alone. Before them, we were one among many, another branch on the tree of minds. After them, we became the only branch left. And though we call that victory, it has always carried a shadow of loss, the loneliness of the last witness. Every time we uncover a fossil jaw, brush away the clay from a massive tooth, or model their face from fragments of bone, we do not resurrect a monster. We resurrect a mirror. In those eyes of reconstructed amber, we see not the wild beast we conquered, but the gentle titan that once looked back at us and forgave our fire. They remind us that strength without understanding fades, and that survival without compassion burns everything it touches. The scientists measure and label the fossils, and that is right. Science gives truth its structure, but art and story give it soul. And through both, the Gigantopithecus lives again, not in muscle or bone, but in wonder. In every spark of empathy we feel for something ancient, something gone, something larger than us. Because when humans met the last giant ape, they also met themselves. And for the first time, realized what they might one day become. A species capable of outlasting every rival, and yet destined to remember them all. The jungle has fallen quiet now. The bones lie deep beneath stone. The wind still moves through the canopies where the giants once walked, carrying a sound like breath, a rhythm older than memory. And if you listen closely, somewhere between the sigh of bamboo and the hum of insects, you can almost hear it, a heartbeat from the other side of time, slow, heavy, like the echo of a titan that refuses to die. Because extinction is not the end. It is only the pause between one world's song and the next.